We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey.
And welcome to my podcast, and thank you for coming today.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. It's great to be here.
So I'm just going to share real quick too. You have a workbook or you have a book, and then you also have a workbook that goes with it, and it's called A Path to Insight.
A Pathway to Insight.
Oh, A Pathway to
Yes.
Insight. Typo,
Yes.
sorry. Pathway to Insight. And what we're going to talk about today, and I know listeners, I say it all the time about self-awareness and how important it is, and we're going to delve into that a little more. So you're going to share your journey from going from no self-awareness, which I was there as well, to awareness inside your body.
Yes. Yes.
So
It's
tell us
something
about.
I didn't know it was possible. So that's why
So tell us about it so we all understand, and tell us about you as well.
Okay. Well, it's quite a long journey from beginning to end. But I think it's something so important that we know, because there are people in society that we interact with that have no self-awareness, and unless you know what that means and how they show themselves in society, you can't really understand it. But once you have deep self-awareness, you can see the differences in other people, because that phrase, as within so without, is absolutely true. So if you know yourself at a deep level, you can see that level in other people too. So it's an interesting.
I agree. I know that to be true for sure. And it's interesting because I just had a situation, an interaction with someone, and it was so obvious they had absolutely no self-awareness. And it's, and it wasn't a judgment thing at all. It really wasn't a judgment thing. It was an awareness thing, and just, okay, note to self kind of thing.
Yeah, it's an observation without judgment. Yes.
Right.
But the thing is, if you have no self-awareness, you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know that you don't have self-awareness.
So true.
So you have to go through that journey of changing, and then you have perspective. You can look back and see where you came from, and you can look and see where you are now, and you can see that change. You can see the difference is in self-awareness. But when you're stuck at that starting place of no self-awareness, you just can't see beyond it.
Yeah. And I talk about, you get in such a stuck place, and you can even kind of see the cycles, and you don't know how to get out of it.
Yes. And often something needs to happen in order for us to start that journey. And that's for sure what happened with me.
Yeah, that's what happened with me as well. It's usually something that gets your attention.
Yes, for sure. And, some people go through life without doing that. My brother did for sure. We had a similar upbringing with all this trauma that we had in our lives. And he went one way. He continued on that journey of alcohol and everything that we had grown up with. And I kind of went the other way. And he ended up not changing at all, and has died already in his early 50s from alcohol. But I don't quite know why some of us choose one direction and some of us don't, but that's the way it is.
I know. I thought that myself, because I know, and I've talked about this before on my podcast, that I became very aware as a teenager what was kind of going on. And I was aware at 19 that I didn't like the way I felt inside my body, but I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to change it, but I was very aware of the pain in my body, and I was desperately trying to find a way to get rid of it.
So that was kind of similar for me. So my mother died when I was 19. That was like a big trauma for me, because I found her dead on the bathroom floor. And I also did not feel good inside. And over the years, kind of the next almost 2 decades, I kept searching. I would do all these things outside of myself. Now I know it sounds strange to say dietary things are outside of ourselves, but they really are. So I would try all these different cleanses and different diets, and I'd read so many different things, but nothing I tried really made any difference. But I guess I had to go through that. And then it was when I was in my late 30s, I had an altercation, a business altercation with two other mothers, and they told me I'd done something wrong. And these women were very self-confident, self-assured, authority type women in my mind. And I was the scared mother on the inside, and they told me I'd done something wrong. And I just was totally triggered, and my mind would just not stop spinning. Over and over it went, over what I said, what they said, what I did, what I could have done differently. I could not stop it spinning for 3 days. And that's when I realized, okay, this is just not working. I absolutely have to change. I knew at that point, it's like, what am I going to do? But I still didn't know at that point. But that kind of triggered something. And I ended up going to a doctor's appointment. I can't remember why. But this doctor was a holistic physician. So he had more tools in his toolbox than many doctors do.
Yes.
And he recognized that I was stressed. And I wasn't going there for stress. I don't remember why I went there, but it was certainly nothing to do with, my childhood trauma. But he recognized I was stressed, and he asked me on a scale of 0 through 10 what my stress level was. Now, I was a stay-at-home mother with 2 young boys, right? So it shouldn't have been too high, but it was an 8 out of 10. And then he asked me why. And it was that question that made me realize, oh, it was finding my mother dead on the bathroom floor when I was 19. So 2 decades earlier, because the tears from that event were still just under the surface. All those years later, I hadn't dealt with it at all. And I had no idea at that point how much it was still affecting me. But he happened to know this technique that's called EFT, which is short for emotional freedom technique. It's also called tapping, because we're tapping on our body as we're talking something through. So he tapped with me about my mother's death for about 15 minutes. And I walked away from that appointment being able to tell the story for the first time in my mind without the tears there. And that's when I realized that we hold those emotions, those traumas physically in our body, and that we can let them go.
Yes.
So for me, that was the key. That's what started the whole journey of unraveling all of my past. I just needed to go to that one appointment.
How empowering that was, right?
Amazing. Yes. Yes.
You don't feel like a victim anymore. You can take control of your own health and your own, healing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for someone like me who loves to do kind of things on my own, I'm not very good at sharing with other people, being vulnerable with other people. It was a perfect technique for me, because I could go home, I could learn everything about it. It was given away for free by the person who developed it, Gary Craig. And so I could go online and I could learn everything about it. And so that's what I did. I learned everything I could about it. But I still had a little bit, I wasn't quite sure, was this a one-time fluke that happened with this doctor? I needed to test it out. So that's what I did. I had a 17-year-old cat at home at the time, and his kidneys were starting to fail. So he was really starting to die. And we'd been told we had to give him a daily saline shot. So an injection of saline solution. And I hated injections. I hated needles. So it was a really stressful thing for me to take on. So the first time I gave him a shot, my hand was shaking almost uncontrollably. So I thought, okay, let me see if I can do something about this small thing with EFT, with the tapping. So I did. So I tapped about every aspect of it, which is something you do with EFT. So I tapped about my hand shaking. I tapped about my fear of hurting the cat. And I tapped about all the injections I had had over the years, because I'd had many. Not as many as people have these days, but I'd had a lot. And the next day, that needle slid right in. All that shaking, all that fear that had been inside of me the day before had totally disappeared. So that's when I realized, okay, the freedom is on the other side of all those traumas and those emotions that we stored inside. And I was determined to find that freedom. So that's when I started. I started using EFT every day, started noticing when I was emotional. So that's the first step. That's the first step in self-awareness, right? We have to become aware when we're becoming emotional. Otherwise, we just get caught up in the emotion and nothing changes.
Right.
So you have to be able to stand back and say, okay, look at me, I'm starting to get frustrated. Then you can do something about it. And that's when I would tap on the frustration, and I would bring myself back to a place of peace. And then I'd carry on with my day and try and notice again the next time something happened, and I would tap and bring myself back to peace. So this carried on, and I noticed that I was becoming more peaceful inside, which was really nice. That was my goal. Inner peace was my goal.
Yeah, because
And
we didn't
so,
have that.
no, for sure. So I could see changes happening, but I wanted it faster and I wanted more of it. So what I did is I wrote down every emotional memory I could think of from my childhood. So all the big traumas, all the little traumas, all the humiliations, the embarrassments, the phrases people in the family used to use. And I tapped through one of those each night for about an hour to an hour and a half each night. I was
Wow.
determined. That's a lot of time, but I was determined.
Yeah.
And that's when things really started to shift. I was definitely becoming quieter inside, peaceful inside. The thoughts that used to spin around in my head, the self-judgmental, self-critical thoughts, were no longer there. And I realized at that point that those thoughts had been phrases that my dad would say in childhood. I took them on as my own and I replayed them, not knowing they weren't mine until they had gone. And then I could look back and say, okay, yeah, they weren't mine.
Amazing. So how long ago has that been that you went through this?
Okay, I'm 57 now, so I started about 20 years ago. So that was the first step. There's other steps that we can talk about too. That was just the first step. And in that process of doing the EFT and releasing those thoughts, that's when I became aware at a deeper level. So when I started out, I didn't know how I felt. Right? Someone could ask me, how are you feeling today? And I would always say the same thing because I didn't want to feel. So doing the EFT, you kind of have to become aware of how you're feeling. So I became aware of my emotions. And then the more I did, I became aware of the physical sensations underneath the emotions. So when we're feeling frustrated, we're actually feeling tension somewhere. And we call that frustration. Or if we're feeling angry, we're feeling tension somewhere inside of us and we call it anger. So this was kind of reversing that process. So where am I feeling frustration? When I say I'm frustrated. So I became with that, for me, frustration is more tension in the solar plexus. So when I became aware of that tension, I found out that I actually didn't need to use EFT anymore. I could have tapped on this frustration in my solar plexus. Right? That works too. But I'd actually been in a group at the time and we were studying A Course in Miracles, and the kind of guru guy in the group, every week he would say to us, it's not about meditation. You don't have to meditate. It's all about feeling your feelings. Now, I started my EFT journey while I was in this group, kind of outside of the group. I was doing the EFT at the same time. So at the beginning, when he would say that, it didn't really mean anything to me. What does it mean to feel your feelings? I don't want to know what my feelings are. But as time went by, I realized, okay, I'm aware of my feelings now. I'm aware of those sensations. So let me try and do what he says. What does it mean to feel your feelings? Well, our feelings have been suppressed for so long, they really don't know how to be felt. So the first time I tried it, I was doing the dishes at the kitchen sink. And I would notice a thought that had some emotion attached, right? So that itself takes some self-awareness. Right? To notice a thought in the process of it coming through and realize it has some emotion. So it could be something as simple as, I'm afraid of making a phone call, right? So I would think that thought, I'd catch it. Okay, I'm thinking this thought that says, I'm afraid of making this phone call. And then I would feel that fear of making the phone call. And I realized in order to hold my awareness on the feeling, on the sensation, right, not the thought, but the feeling inside the body, I had to stop and actually hold my breath and hold myself like a statue, because that feeling, that sensation would want to slip away from me because it was so used to being suppressed.
Right.
So I would hold my awareness on that sensation. I would even talk to it. I'd say things like, okay, I can feel you. I can feel this fear right there in my solar plexus. I just want to allow you to be felt. I just want to feel you. And at some point I'd have to take a deep breath, obviously, because I've been holding it. And I would notice that the sensation of fear would have diminished slightly. So then I would do it again. Okay, this thought, I'm afraid of making this phone call. I would feel that fear, do the same thing, hold my breath, talk to the fear, take another deep breath, and notice it had diminished a little bit more. So I would keep going with the same thought until all the fear had released, at which point it becomes easy to make the phone call. Because there's no fear.
Yeah, quickly. Go make that quick phone
Right.
call.
So this felt like a deeper level to me of self-awareness, and it
Mhm.
was. I didn't understand that at the time.
Right.
So I started to use this daily instead of using the EFT. And in the evenings, instead of doing the hour and a half of tapping, I would lay on the sofa and I would bring collective traumas to mind, because I'd already worked through my childhood traumas, but I wanted to keep going. So I would bring things like 9/11 to mind, or the Loma Prieta earthquake that I was in, and just feel all those feelings, all those sensations that had been stored inside from years prior. And it felt really good. So I kept doing it, and my ability to focus on those sensations increased the more I did it. When I started out, I would often fall asleep because I'm laying on the sofa.
Right.
As time went by, I could focus more and more intently. And at some point during that process, I realized I could keep my awareness or my focus inside my body after the tension had released. So I might have been feeling, that fear or that frustration inside my solar plexus. And normally when I would release or take a deep breath, my awareness would come back up my body. I'd maybe think about something else for a little bit, and then I would go back inside and feel the feelings again. But I realized I could keep my awareness inside after I'd taken a deep breath. Like, it would stay inside, which is a really weird thing to say. I know for me, it's like, it felt totally different. I'd never experienced before. I'd never heard of anyone talking about it before. So I was just playing. So I just played. Well, what can I do now? So I realized I could move my awareness around inside. And I was working in my abdomen at the time. So I just moved my awareness a little bit to the side and feel what was there. And I realized I could feel the difference between tension and no tension. So I'd find a place that felt tense and I would focus on it and just feel it. Same thing that I'd been doing before with the feeling your feelings, but now I'm actually inside the body. And again, my focus was so intense that over time it would just release. I could feel tension releasing on the inside. So I just kept playing. I kept doing that. It was fun. And it feels really good to release tension that's been held for so long.
I actually have been experiencing that myself.
Uh-huh.
Because what I realized, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to say, one of the things that I realized is that I carried a lot of tension around. That's just how I did, all my life. I was constantly tense. And as a result, I've done a lot of damage from being so tense all the time. And so having that awareness, first of all, is great. But then I had to go deeper, and I did have to go into my body, because my body was so automatically in that place of always being tense that I still to this day have to make a conscious awareness of realizing, because I did just, we were talking, I realized I was kind of like clenching my jaw, and I'm like, oh, wait, relax, and but it's a self-awareness within your body.
Yeah. So let me just say a subtle thing so that people can try and understand. So what I was doing with the feelings part was holding that tension in my jaw or my neck, right? Not telling myself to release it, because that kind of suppresses it or bypasses it. I was actually holding that tension there and allowing myself to feel it, and then it would release on its own.
It's like, I want to be acknowledged.
Right. It wants to be felt. It's just energy that's stuck inside the body. And once it's been felt and acknowledged enough, it just leaves. Yeah. So good. I'm glad we got to explain that.
Yeah. I agree. And you explained it way better than I did, but it's just interesting, because so many of the things that I learned about myself for years before there was all this awareness out here now of trauma and everything, is just kind of discovering this stuff on my own and just noticing in my body and having some self-awareness enough to notice that, after I've had many surgeries on my body because of everything I've done to it gets your attention, but it's really important. So continue on, because this is really interesting.
Okay. So I kept working throughout my torso, just releasing tension, focusing on it and releasing it. And eventually, now it took many, many months. I can't remember how long. It took a while. I was able to put my awareness inside my head, which was
Ooh.
so different than from my body. And part of the difference was because I was actually close to my ears at this point, which again sounds such a weird thing to say. But as I kept releasing tension going inside, and the pain inside my left cheek was just unbearable. I mean, this was pain and tension that had been inside my head my whole life, but I wasn't aware of it until I could get my awareness inside my head. Then I became aware of it, right? But at that point, I had a technique so I could work on it little by little by little. And as I did that, one day I actually heard, because I'm close to my ears, and felt something release. And it sounded and felt like old fabric ripping. So it was a little scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing. So that's when I went home and did a little research, and I realized that it was an adhesion in the connective tissue that was releasing. So I realized it was actually a good thing. It wasn't a bad thing. So I kept going. And over time, I would just release more and more tension. And it got to the point where I could actually feel my skull bones relax. Now, I hadn't known they were not relaxed before until they relaxed, right? And then I could see, okay, there's a difference there.
Right.
And it was at some point during that process that I got some x-rays taken, just orthodontic x-rays. I've had lots of orthodontia in my years. And I had an old one, and I compared the two because I had felt things shifting. I knew things were shifting. So to see the x-ray comparison between 1 year and then 8 years prior was just huge.
Yeah.
To see those changes happening. And I also had myself measured. Now, we don't normally measure ourselves when we get older. It's like, there's no point. But I had always been 5'4.25". That 1/4 inch was very important to me. But I could feel that my neck was almost stretching, straightening. And I could sense that I was looking at things from a different angle. So I knew something had shifted. So first I had my son measure me, and I was 1/2 an inch taller. And then I had my husband measure me later on, and I was 5'5". So that is the release of the burden that we've been carrying all these years. It really pushes us down. And as we release it, it's really releasing our whole body. So that's my journey.
You know what? I 100% believe you, because I want to experience it to the degree that you're feeling it. Because, it's simple things like, and this is going to sound weird. It's gonna, it's one of those things.
We've talked about some weird things already.
Talked about some weird things. So when I used to get my nails done, and this was, we're 20 years ago, I didn't know how to relax my hands. Does that make sense? I literally didn't. I was so tense that the guy that was doing my nails, he would like try to get, he'd even like let my hand drop because it was so, but I didn't know. I knew what he was telling me. He was telling me that my hands, I was being tense, but I didn't know how to relax them.
Totally. We have so much tension in our body that we're just not aware of.
Yes.
I remember my orthodontist trying to relax my jaw, and he said, "You must have so much tension in your head." And I said, "I don't think so." I was so wrong, but I was not aware of it. It's stored in our subconscious mind. So it's like our body actually prevents us having to experience that pain. Because if I had experienced all the pain that was inside my head and my body 20 years ago, I couldn't have managed. So it's a step-by-step unwinding process. And really, based on what you just said, it's really a step-by-step relaxation process. But we can relax deeper than we think we can. So I'm relaxing. What I'm doing when I'm focusing on the inside is I'm just relaxing a little bit more each time, and that relaxation releases the adhesions in the connective tissue and in the bones. I can feel, I can sense inside my bones at this point and feel the tension, hold my awareness on it, and I can feel the tension relax in the bones themselves.
So do you do this while you're meditating? Is there how do you do it? Like, can you give us a
Yeah, I've never meditated. I mean, some people say what I do is meditation because
it sounds like it. That's why I asked. That's what it sounds like.
I'm just asking myself, okay, or I'm relaxing, and my focus goes straight to the place that's holding the most tension. Where is that? Then I focus on that place and I hold my awareness on it, and it releases. Now, to begin with, I used to do it on the sofa. right? Now I can do it anywhere, anytime. I multitask. I do it when as soon as I wake up, last thing when I'm going to sleep. I can do it when I'm watching TV, watching movies, listening. I can do it when I'm walking.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's easy to do, but early on, I really had to focus, had to pay attention. But that's all I'm doing. I'm just asking myself, where's the most tension, right? So if you relax yourself right now,
Mm-hmm.
can you feel where the most tension is in your body?
Mm-hmm. My lower back.
Okay, so then I would focus on that tension in my lower back. Just feel it, allow it to be felt.
That's hard.
Mm-hmm. And to begin with, might take lying down and relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
But it becomes easier and easier, and the power of focus becomes more and more intense, like a laser beam. And then it will help it relax. And then you just ask the same thing again, and then again, and then again. And it will move around the body.
Yeah.
Because it's part of the connective tissue. So you're holding
Mm-hmm.
yourself in one place, maybe to avoid feeling something somewhere else. And as it is in one place, you'll feel it in somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm releasing, I still have some pain in this left cheek. It's much more dispersed and it's much smaller and in smaller places.
Yeah.
But I will feel into that and it will release in my right neck.
Because they're connected. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
I am going to definitely try this. I love this. This is really cool.
Good.
Seriously, because I've been trying to find a way to do that, and a lot of times what I'll do is I do breathing techniques and stuff, and I have found ways with breathing and focusing to get me to get myself to relax. But this is going even deeper.
Yeah. Now, I
this
couldn't
is
have done this at the beginning. I had to go through EFT because with EFT, you don't have to have a lot of self-awareness. All you need to know are the words. So, like when I worked through my mother's death, I had the story, I have the words that I could work through in my mind while I'm tapping.
Mm-hmm.
And that itself releases the tension inside the body related to that trauma, right? So you're accessing the tension through words to begin with. So maybe
Right.
if you have an injury, maybe from the past, right, you could just talk through the words of what happened with that injury, what happened before, what happened afterwards, how it's affected your life. You could tap through that with EFT using those words.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a deeper level of self-awareness, if you can actually feel the sensations in the body and focus on them, then you can do that other technique.
I mean, because the truth is, and I think you said at the beginning of the podcast, that we store our trauma in our body, but it can be released. And I know that to be true. Yeah.
Yes.
And this is all part of it.
Right. And the way I really knew that or understood that is, I could see things happening with EFT, but once I started to doing the what I call feeling your feelings or feeling those sensations, focusing on that tension. So even focusing on your lower back, as you focus on it and it releases, it's quite possible that a memory will pop into your mind.
Oh.
And to me, they were place memories. So I knew, okay, something happened there. That country, that house, something happened there, but I didn't know what. But I knew it had released because as the tension released, the memory kind of popped in my mind and just dissipated. It was just gone.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they're absolutely connected.
Yeah, because I've been doing EMDR work, and what's interesting, I don't know if this is common. It doesn't matter. It's working for me, but in that EMDR, I have actually been helping the younger Lisa, the little Lisa, and the teenage Lisa, and using words and helping them have a voice and acknowledging and validating what they went through. And I notice as I'm even doing that, I mean, it's a whole mind shift for me, but it's also a body shift. I can feel a release as I'm working through that and getting through that part of the trauma. But it's been really interesting because I didn't even think about little Lisa for the longest. I never thought about that. And it was brought to my attention. And as I've been doing, little Lisa and I are on pretty good terms. We've worked through a lot of stuff. I'm now working with teenage Lisa because she's really the one that's been through the ringer. And that's where a lot of the physical stuff came to be as well.
Interesting. Yes.
Yeah,
EMDR is very similar in many ways to EFT.
correct.
And you're moving the eyes, you're working through the connective tissue, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
physical component to it, which is
Mm-hmm.
why I think EFT is so beneficial, is that tapping on the places in the body, the points in the body that are connected to the connective tissue.
Right.
That's what's doing the release. And with EMDR, it's the moving of the eyes, which is also connected to the connective tissue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? That helps the energy release from the nervous system. So yes, all connected.
So do you have workshops on this, or is this just something you teach? And if you do, how do you teach it? Like, is it through online? Do you have a YouTube channel?
I do have a YouTube channel. Yes, I do. And there are lots of videos on there about all sorts of different subjects, but they're obviously all connected.
Of course.
So yeah, and there's an EFT demo video on there, and I talk about the feelings, and I have a book and a workbook that kind of goes into more depth, but it's all available there. And I just want people to learn to do it and to actually do the work, because we spend so much time thinking we haven't found it yet, right? We need to find the next thing and the next
Right.
thing, but really we actually have to stop and do the work.
Do the work. Yeah, exactly. Not chase after. It's so true.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. It's difficult, but it is so worth it, because you were just describing, when you were telling the story, like the first time you felt that release. And it's, I've said so many times that when you begin to heal, and that first time you have that first really taste of healing, for me, it was like, oh, I want more of that. How do I find more of that? And that's exactly what you did. You're like, oh, I got to release. Oh, I like that. I want more of that. And that's what I want to encourage the readers or the listeners, I keep saying readers, the listeners, is that, as you begin your healing journey and, pay attention to that first time or that next time you heal, and let that motivate you to move on to the next step.
Yeah. And some of us are so scared to start it,
Yeah.
because we're afraid of what's inside, and we think it's going to annihilate us somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But really, it's just stuck energy.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a beyond it, right? And beyond it feels lighter. It feels more vibrant, right? It's really an enlightenment process, right?
Yes.
We're actually becoming lighter.
Mm-hmm.
And as that happens, things start to change. Life becomes more fun.
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
absolutely worth starting the journey.
Yes. So what would you like to leave our listeners with? And then tell us how everybody could reach you.
Okay. One of the things that I had not realized when I started this journey is how much depth there is to life.
Mm.
And we're not aware of it when we cannot see the depth inside of us.
Oh.
So just being able to understand why things are happening is so nice, rather than getting caught up in them. And there's just so many different aspects to it. I mean, one of the fun things for me is that release of tension in my skull, right? Our skull is like an echo chamber. It's where our voice comes from. So as I released the tension, my voice changed. I can sing notes that I couldn't sing in the past.
I believe it. That makes total sense.
Which is just so lovely, right? Mm-hmm. So there's so many different subtle changes that we aren't aware of until we get there. So I think a lot of people are disappointed in life, or they're feeling this, what's the point at this point? But once you start this work, you realize the point.
Yes, when you start feeling it.
Yes, you feel a depth to life that you've never experienced before, and it's absolutely worth doing. So I encourage everyone to take up this journey.
And it's for everybody. Absolutely. You and I aren't, we're not special that it happened to us, and it can't. Absolutely. It's for everybody.
Yes. Yes. And I believe it can change the world, because I believe that when we're peaceful inside, we're attracting peace into our future.
Yes.
So the more of us do this work, the more peace we're going to attract into our future.
Exactly. That is so true. So how could the listeners reach out to you if they wanted to get in touch with you?
Well, there's several different ways. I have my website, hince.com. I also am pretty active on Facebook and will answer anything there. And my YouTube channel is at Hince. So you can contact me there as well.
And we'll have all that, of course, for the listeners as well. They'll be able to connect with you through YouTube.
Great. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. This is great. Seriously. And, I feel like I'm at the beginning stages of what you were describing, but I'm definitely on that journey. And I love that we had this conversation because I'm absolutely going to implement that. So, I had a few weeks ago, I had a podcast and the guest had said, she said, this therapist said something really wise to me. And that is, those of us that have had trauma all of our life, like it's been kind of a part of our whole childhood. That's all we know. Our body is just on high alert all the time. It doesn't know how to relax. It doesn't know how to calm down. It doesn't know how to be peaceful. And we have to teach it. And so I'm telling you, I know on the podcast that you could see my visible, because it's like, you're right. And I have been doing that, but now I am purposefully doing that. And I took some advice that she had given, and I'm taking advice that you're giving, and there's a couple others too. So it's making my world a whole lot better. So thank you.
And that's what we need, just more people taking up the work.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. This has been great.
Thank you. It's been great too.